Chris Skingley, you're a student from Brentwood.
It's hard for some people to find jobs that pay above minimum wage, in part due to competition from EU workers. Would controlled immigration help job opportunities for UK nationals?
Chuka Amuna, control immigration and there are more jobs.
Well, there were two issues that you brought up there. Jobs and the impact of the European Union on our job market. Here in London, there are 650,000, at least 650,000 jobs linked to our membership of the EU. Now, I'm not going to deny that immigration poses challenges sometimes in the labour market, and I think the best way for us to ensure that actually you get a decent wage in our labour market is by having a good national minimum wage at the highest rate possible, and that we see it enforced. And that is an issue for domestic government to deal with. But in a way, you have to think about the number of jobs which are linked to our membership of the European Union, and you have to offset that against the challenges of immigration. And one thing I would just say to the audience here and viewers is the idea that immigration as a challenge is going to fall away if we leave the European Union is simply untrue. We've actually got more people coming here.
Let's just see with Chris. Are you dealing with a situation where you can't get a job because you think it's gone to a migrant?
I'm a student currently, no, but it's more the minimum wage. I think it's become, it's the wages more than actual immigrants supposedly stealing jobs.
What, driving wages down because there are so many potential workers? Pretty Patel, that's right, isn't it?
Well, we've seen the Bank of England have said that as well in the report that they've published, that obviously migration, more people coming to the United Kingdom from Europe, has led to wages going down by 2%. But I would like to say as well, and I think it is important, that, you know, it is a national issue for national government. There is no doubt about that when it comes to controlling our borders and having a fair immigration policy. And that is exactly what I feel and Vote Leave feel that we could achieve if we were to take back control of our immigration policy and actually say that we want the brightest and the best, and we don't have the unlimited, the free movement that comes from the European Union that we currently have.
Let's get some comments on this. Yes, sir, here.
My concern is that Brexiters should see the whole of Europe as somewhere where we can work, rather than just being so insular and being worried about the minimum wage in this country. The whole of Europe is our home to work in, and because of fears of immigration, we're losing our freedom to study, work, do business, have healthcare in all of Europe.
OK, let me bring in on that Medea Ahmed, and you're a student as well.
Yeah, I'm a student. As a Londoner, I feel like the language being used by the Leave campaign is actually divisive and it's fueling racial tension. And I don't understand how the net figure of immigration that the Leave campaign are really keen on using, over half of that figure are migrants from outside the EU. So how on earth is leaving going to solve the problem of immigration?
John Mills, answer that. Well, because it is now about a 50-50 split, EU and non-EU, isn't it?
It is. But I think the big problem, really, about immigration is the scale. Nobody wants to stop immigration altogether. The real issue is whether we can afford to have as many people coming to this country as we've got at the moment, and may well have a lot more in the future. If we have a living wage of £9 an hour, that's something like 4 times the average wage in Romania and Bulgaria. And that's going to produce a huge attraction for people to come to the UK, particularly if the European Union continues to do poorly.
But can't you then stop? Sorry, but can't you then stop non-EU people coming in because they're half the total?
Well, the answer is you can restrict to some extent. That is true. But what is really fueling the problem here is the very large number of people coming from the EU, because there's no restrictions on them at all. For people to come in from outside the EU, there are at least some rules that have to be met.
Medea wants to come back in.
The Leave campaign, they have used that, saying it's not fair that outside of EU people are finding it harder. But I don't understand. Are you calling for fairer borders or an end to border or closing of borders? Because is it just a tactic being used, or
quickly, Pretty?
Well, absolutely. We are effectively saying that we need to take back control of our borders and our immigration policy. But we want fair immigration. We want the policy to end discrimination. There are people from outside of the European Union that could give a great deal to our economy and contribute a great deal to our country as well. The Commonwealth countries are a classic example as well.
You're the employment minister. you're responsible for the controls which apply to non-EU citizens coming over here. And you know,
Actually, government is, not me solely.
You are the employment minister. And let's not forget the other side of the story here, which is that we've got 2 million Britons living and working in the European Union. We have 100,000 EU nationals helping run our public services, in particular the NHS. And here in London, we've got loads of EU citizens-owned businesses that employ Londoners.
Richard Reid, we haven't heard from you yet.
Well, firstly, because
does business really need to employ EU migrants instead of British workers?
Well, I think what a business wants is the opportunity to employ brilliant people, of which they come in all shapes and sizes from all over the place. Now, in terms of this being a London debate, we've also got to get on some facts on the table. More than 2/3 of immigrants to London are from outside of the EU. So it's even more skewed to being not from the EU. So now, they're welcome as far as I'm concerned. I live in London. It is a fantastic, probably the greatest city in the world, and seen as a role model city for how it socially integrates with people of all different cultures, faiths, and as a result we have a more joyous, vibrant, fast-growing, wealthy city. The idea that we want to start trying to ruin that,
all right.
it doesn't make sense.
Anyone else
We have
with
to
a
ask
question?
ourselves, Jeremy, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of city do we want to be? What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be a country and a city that builds bridges or put up walls? I want to be the one that builds bridges.
It's a particular London thing, isn't it? London is different from the rest of the country. Yes, sir. Now, you've been waiting. This gentleman right here.
I worked at a company in London that were just employing exclusively Romanian guys, and they were all living in a house together. And really, they were sort of entry-level jobs, and you couldn't really get a look in if you were a British worker because you didn't speak the language. And I just don't see how that's in the interest of British people to have that situation, because with that level of EU migration there.
Right. But you wouldn't be able to, if it was the case that they were only employing people from Romania, and that was, if you like, the requirement, then that would be in breach of our employment laws, many of those rights of which, of course, derive from EU legislation.
Yeah, but he's saying their language gave them a lockout in some way. So they had it.
Supervising capacity, and there was one guy who could speak English.
Yeah.
And they were a great bunch of guys. I liked them. They worked very hard, but they were doing jobs that a British school leaver could have done, and a British person couldn't get a look in there.